Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Pride Perspectives, a conversation with the community. Welcome to Trinity-Pawling. For those of you who are on this call or this Pride Perspective for the first time, welcome. I know some of you who have registered have been to many of these, and we thank you for joining us again. The Pride Perspective series started back in April. And all of our conversations were recorded and put on our YouTube channel. So don't hesitate to head to our YouTube channel and hear fantastic conversations. Just a couple weeks ago, well, back in December, we had a great conversation with a current parent, Jeff Gorton, New York Ranger GM, as well as wonderful conversations with alums, current parents, current students, faculty. Everybody has been a part of these Pride Perspective series. And coming up in the coming weeks, next week, we'll have a virtual open house talking to some of our current students and just more and more about Trinity-Pawling and why it's so important to so many of us, why so many of our community is a part of what we do. So thank you again for joining us. And as you know, with these Pride Perspectives, well, first of all, we have a great panel tonight, and they'll be introducing themselves in just a little bit. But I also want to just go over logistics. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. That way, we can get to your questions either throughout the night or towards the end of the conversation. So again, Q&A is the perfect spot to do that, and we'll get to those as best we can. So without further ado, again, tonight is about Pride Perspectives and Trinity-Pawling Athletics. In tonight's panel, as you can see, we have a variety of wonderful coaches, passionate coaches from different athletic arenas, and also alumni, and of course, a parent of two of our fantastic students that have come through these doors. And I'm going to have them introduce themselves. And but again, tonight is all about Trinity-Pawling Athletics and what it means to be a part of that brotherhood. And we're talking, we're imagining September 2021 when we're back on the soccer field and the football field and the cross country trails and cheering on the blue and gold. So without further ado, Mr. Coach Clawher, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little about yourself?
Of course. Thanks, Mr. Burlington. As the screen says, my name is Sam Clawher. Currently coach soccer and tennis here at Trinity-Pawling, off the field and off the court. I coach history and economics. This past year, I started teaching middle school history and typically senior economics. And I also serve as the director of equity and inclusion. This is my 4th year here at Trinity-Pawling. It's also my 8th year here in the United States. Originally from Ireland, and actually came over to America to go to a boarding school when I was 17, and pretty blind into what I was going into. And my year at a different boarding school was life-changing. And as I finished college and I was looking for what I wanted to do with my life, I wanted an environment where, I could be a part of a family, I could be a part of a brotherhood, as Mr. Burlington said. And I think in my 4 years here at Trinity-Pawling, that's what I found thus far.
Thanks, Coach. Coach Lafontaine.
Hey, I'm Nick Lafontaine. Thanks for coming and joining us tonight. I'm looking forward to this great panel. These are a bunch of people. So I think without a doubt, the most handsome panel you might have had so far, JP. So I think we have that title locked up. I am Nick Lafontaine. I'm the head football coach here. I've been the head football coach for 9 years. I'm also the co-head coach of track and field. Share that honor with Jim McDougall. I teach off the field. I teach math. I've done geometry and algebra 2. So a lot of the younger guys. Before that, I've coached college football for 11 years at a bunch of different schools. And it was a lot of fun, learned a lot, and it was a great time. But my son was born, and my wife and I were looking for a different route. And we kind of landed here, and it's been a great thing. Lincoln is now 9, and my daughter Sawyer is 5, and it's been a great experience.
Thank you, sir. Coach Weber.
Yes, good evening. Good evening, parents, friends, and Happy New Year to everybody. My name is Mike Weber. I have been at Trinity-Pawling in my 18th year now. I teach in the science department, prominently teaching chemistry and environmental science. And I'm a coach on the football field as an assistant coach, varsity team. And I have transitioned over the 18 years from assistant varsity baseball to the head baseball coach. I live on campus at the top of the quad in the Anderson house with my family. My wife, Sue, who is an emergency department nurse at Danbury. My daughter, Veronica, who's 13. And then I have two boys that have graduated in 17 and 18, Joe and Larry. Larry's at McGill in his last year, working remotely. And Joe is also working remotely at University of Vermont. I'm a transplant. I actually came in after 10 years of working in consulting field, the environmental consulting field out of New Haven.
Fantastic. Coach Fideli.
Hello, my name's Ralph Fideli. I'm a graduate. I'm an alum of Trinity-Pawling. I am one of the wrestling coaches, but I've also assisted in the baseball and football programs. I also assist Josh Collins, the Dean of Students, with the Junior Leadership Ropes Course program. I teach in the English department, and I live in Hastings with freshmen and eighth graders.
Fantastic. And Coach Gilman.
Yeah, welcome everybody. Glad to be here. I guess I've been a part of Trinity-Pawling for 16 years. I'm finishing up my 10th year as an employee, but I went here, I graduated in 2005. I was a day student, so I got to go here for 6 years. So it's possible to do the full swing here. But I teach analytical writing and Comp 1 in the CLA in the lead program. I'm an assistant varsity hockey and lacrosse coach. I work with most of the athletes in the strength and conditioning piece in the weight room. I work the dean of the senior class, and I again, as a student here, you don't think you'll wind up back as sure Ralph and JP, but you can never kind of shed the values and what you learned here and what it means to be a part of the blue and gold, as you referenced earlier, JP. But I'm super happy to be back. I live in Star Dorm with my wife and my son Brady, who causes a ruckus for JP outside. But welcome, excited to be on the panel with all these great coaches and great teachers, but also excited to share some light with you guys. And
actually, Coach Gilman, can you talk a little bit about and also Coach Fideli, just your time as a student athlete, and we all have mentioned the brotherhood, but athletically, I know you both played multiple sports, and just talk a little bit about that commitment, and also what it led to, not only for for 6 and 4 years, but what it led to for college as well.
No, great question. I mean, obviously, being in this community, and I think some of us have been students here for a while, but whether you're a 6-year student, a 4-year student, or you come in for a PG year, I think what you quickly learn, we talk about the brotherhood, but what you quickly learn about is the community and what you're going to school every day with these kids, you're eating with them, you're going to class with them, you're living in the dorm with them, you're supporting each other on the field. So I think it quickly means a lot to wear the blue and gold or to play for TP or wherever sport it is. But I remember, I wasn't obviously, I played hockey and lacrosse. I dabbled a little bit with football until Ralph punished me on the field, but I did some cross country. But I remember, getting on a bus and Friday night and going up to watch, Ralph and watch the football team play Kent. I remember getting on a bus and going to support basketball. I remember, after the lacrosse game, walking, right behind us and walking out of the field and watching baseball or going to the track. So I think it means a lot to be a part of this community and to especially to play sports. I mean, in all areas, but the athletic piece is super important to a lot of our athletes and a lot of the students here. But I think being able to kind of rally and support and to show up for each other, I think means a lot. And I think sometimes you don't always get to experience that at other places, but in a school where you're literally living with these kids and doing everything with them all day long, it's super important, I think, to kind of respect that, and you respect the effort that they put in and on a daily basis, and you see what they go through, whether it's, you know, in the weight room, on the football field, on the baseball field, on the mats, or in the rink. You know, it's super, you're excited to go down and support them and to be in their corner.
Yeah, you know, I always like the in the winter when you'll see like the migration of kids that aren't playing that day go from, you know, the wrestling room to the basketball court and then to the hockey rink, and you know, the boys just feeding off of that energy from their buddies coming out to support them, and being a student here, playing football, baseball, and wrestling. Wrestling was my main sport, but the memories and you know, the lessons you learn from playing another sport that isn't your main sport is crucial. I just think of being able to play baseball with kids that were going on to play Division I baseball and seeing how they prepared every day in practice and for games, and being able to pick up on their intensity and their work ethic, or, you know, playing along Sean Gleason, who was a PG quarterback here, and seeing how competitive he was and how he prepared as a quarterback. And, you know, no surprise that he's gone on to coach at a very high level in college. So you're able to experience and see just how many dedicated scholar athletes there are here, and appreciate the way other people approach their sport and feed off of that. And, you know, I think of, you know, the quote, iron sharpens iron. And it doesn't just have to happen in your main sport. You can, you know, go experience that in another sport and pick up on how other people compete and work. And you know, to me, that was valuable and something that I always remember.
And Coach Weber, what was it like? Obviously, you know, having two sons go through here, and so as a parent, because we have we have current parents on this call, we have past parents, and hopefully there's some prospective parents that will be joining us and their sons in September. What was it like as a father watching your sons grow up in this world?
It's a great segue. I go back to what Nick started off this meeting, and I think it's an incredible theme, is about people. You know, when I chose to come to TP myself, I didn't understand the depth of the people that were here, though I chose, you know, I remember walking down the steps of Cluett after my own interview and saying, geez, I really want to be a part of this community just because of surrounding myself with incredible people. And then having those people become mentors to my own sons and now my daughter. You know, they're growing up with faculty friends in their lives that have touched them at every moment along the way, you know, whether it was when they were younger and sort of teaching them a lesson about where to go, maybe not what to do, and those kind of things. They became great mentors in their lives on the, you know, and as they got older, the trust that was built between my boys and the faculty here at Trinity-Pawling was an incredible gift. And I think it instilled a lot of confidence in my boys, allowed them to flourish in areas outside of maybe their dream areas in the beginning. And both of my sons were multiple sport athletes. Larry was a cross-country runner and was with the track and field team. Joe was a soccer hockey first, and then lacrosse, and then he switched actually, with encouragement from the faculty here. Hockey was, with the other sports, was taking a toll on his body as a freshman, and he could have kind of also saw the light at the end of the tunnel, which was hockey is very difficult to play, play in the league. So he stepped back and went to squash. Just that alone, that encouragement, for him to move into a different area that he was not comfortable with, and then, ended up being a varsity athlete in that area. And a tremendous segue maybe here for other topics is that I think it's important for parents, and I talk to a lot of families about this, to recognize that Trinity-Pawling, I speak to a lot of baseball families, but Trinity-Pawling can't just be about baseball. If you're going to come to Trinity-Pawling, it has to be about more than just your son's sport, or it's not the right place, because the benefits of this community come in areas that are way beyond the field. My son, as an anecdote, experienced this during his sophomore year when he joined the theater. So a three-sport varsity athlete joins the theater. When we walked away and was heading off to college, reflecting back on his time here, it was actually that experience that made this whole. It wasn't about the lacrosse field or the soccer field or the squash court. It was about being in a different environment, taking healthy risks, and those are the risks that actually helped him grow the most. But he was able to be taught by tremendous people, and there was a lot of touches with incredible coaches and so on, throughout his life, both of their lives.
Well,
And
and
Mike, I was,
yeah, I was actually just going to throw it to you before I went to Coach Loff. I was going to actually say, Sam, you came over from Ireland to a great school as a soccer tennis player, but I always hear stories about the wintertime for you and as a postgraduate, you weren't maybe in the gym working out. What were you actually doing at that school?
It was one of the best 2 months of my life. I got to play thirds basketball in my PG year at Berkshire, and I kid you, like, I never held a basketball before. Back home, we used to get games on ESPN America. We'd only get Celtics versus Lakers. This is when it was Kevin Garnett and Kobe Bryant, and so I'd watch maybe 3 basketball games a year, if even. Never held a basketball. And what happened was my head soccer coach was the assistant thirds basketball coach, and just got 4 or 5 of us to play, and I was tall enough and I could win a couple rebounds, and that was about it. But it was an incredible experience, just as someone who likes to think about the game of soccer, and being able to be surrounded by players playing a different sport with different spacing, with different rules, and I'd be in games asking the rules sometimes, I'll be really honest, asking the referees what the rules were. But just that chance to play a sport and compete every day, but do it for fun. Where, I knew I was getting better I knew I was getting more athletic. I knew I was working on my footwork. I knew I was working on my spatial awareness, but I didn't have that pressure of being in that varsity sport and that pressure cooker environment on a daily basis. And it was, I think I'm a better person for that experience. And I'm very appreciative for those 3 or 4 months. And I don't think they'd have taken me back. I wasn't very good. But it was a great experience nonetheless. And I was going in there before you asked that question, and to Mike, I was blessed to coach Joe in his final year at TP. Joe was a senior my first year here. He quickly became the captain of our soccer team in my first year, and it wasn't even to them. And obviously a lot of that is to do with, how well he was raised and how great a kid he is. But Joe brought with him 10 seasons of varsity sports or 9 seasons of varsity sports or whatever it is, in a variety of avenues. And he knew what it meant to be successful in a team, not just in that sport, not just on the soccer field, not just in the squash court, but as a cohesive unit. And that benefit from being around different coaches, as Mike said, different teams, different leaders, different PGs when he was a freshman, different freshmen when he was older, stood to him. And it made my first year incredibly easy just to have someone in that environment. And I think Joe was emblematic, but not. There are more people similar to Joe at TP that come up in every year. I was appreciative for that experience.
Yeah, and Coach Loff, something we've gone on over the last couple of weeks. We've gone on a couple of tours together with student athletes, specifically football players that are looking to come to Trinity-Pawling. But what's been great for me listening to you is, yes, they're student athletes, football players, but there's also that conversation that you have with them about stepping up in other ways. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I really appreciate taking tours with you too, JP. I think the banter is very good, and the back and forth. Yeah, I try to talk to the kids, and I think most of us do this when we're talking about developing the whole person. So like very much to what Webbs is talking about, where I flat out put it out there, and I know other coaches do as well. It's like, it's about you as a person growing from, if you're a younger ninth grader, eighth grader, growing that way, or even a postgraduate coming in and, living on your own, maturing, self-advocating, all that stuff. So we talk about that a whole lot more than we talk about football, probably more than you talk about wrestling or baseball or soccer or tennis or lacrosse or hockey. And that's most of the dialogue that we have when we're doing the visits with kids. And it's what we want to get across because it's what we're passionate about. So I think everybody on this panel is passionate. We've chosen to work with young people for our life. And we are as competitive as they can get. But we're not going to be judged by just the X's and O's and the wins and losses. We're going to be judged by the people that we put out there. And I think to me, like, that's really super valuable. And not to get too hokey or anything, but again, like at the end game, if my son Lincoln, who's 9, grows up to be anything like Larry Weber or Joe Weber or JP Burlington, Ralph Fideli, Chris Gilman, then we probably did a pretty good job as a community and as parents. So, that's what we talk about and that's what we believe in. That being said, it's also super useful, the placement part of it. So we were trying to, and most of us teach and coach multiple sports and stuff. But a lot of times when you're going down and, you're almost countercultural right now with, the culture of specialization, and you have to focus on one thing, and you have to be, you're losing time by, if you're not doing, whatever sport for 12 months a year. And, I always kind of bring up the point where when we're walking around, in football, in our cycle, recruiting cycle, coaches come through in December and in May. And, we'll have 60, 80 coaches walk through these doors. And when we're walking around, every coach that comes through always asks, well, what's so-and-so doing in the winter? And you say, well, he's wrestling. He's an All-American wrestler. Well, immediately that coach thinks certain things, right? And most of those are positive, saying like, he's a hard worker. He's probably super competitive. He's probably got an element of toughness, a physical toughness and a mental toughness, right? It's Webb's baseball kid that says, hey, what else do you do? Well, I play safety for the football team. Well, again, like there's an element there that is super helpful. So I think, we kind of kicked it off with some of the intangible stuff with Coach Gilman and Coach Fideli, some of the development stuff. And I think that's ultimately our goal. But there's also stuff that is super useful and honestly what college coaches are looking for.
Can I jump in there for a second, JP? And I think building off that, Lof, like we, I talk to, again, mostly hockey and lacrosse families, but what in particular, when you're talking, with a hockey family, right? What you just said, Lof, you're going to get that at Trinity-Pawling. So whether you come here as an athlete and you want to play sports in college and you're successful at that, or again, you want to play sports in college and, maybe you don't quite get there yet, but the idea is what you're going to learn here and what you have to do on a daily basis is what's going to emulate what you're going to have to do at that level. So whether you do make it and play sports in college, right? Balancing of schoolwork, going to class, speaking with professors, making it to workouts, doing your film sessions, still going to practice, seeing the trainers, right? Treating your body correctly, like eating healthy, all those things that you're going to kind of learn here that maybe you don't have before you get here. You don't kind of have all those ducks in a row, right? You need to balance that here for 3 seasons, whether it's, you're a hockey kid that's doing baseball and football, or you're helping out the cross country team, or you're going, you're helping out soccer, whatever it may be. You need to figure out a way to balance all those, and we're going to help you. And we do a great job of that, I think. But again, you need to do that, and you're going to have to do that at the next level. So, why not learn that as early as a 9th grader, 10th grader, 11th grader, but even some of these PGs that, again, you're trying to get to that end goal, whatever it may be. But, I take it one step further. If that's your end goal, and again, some people realize that, they may get to their senior year and they don't want to play college sports, and that's fine too. But think about everything you just did for the last, 2, 3, 4 years, 6 years of your life right here. That's going to pay dividends in college, whether you're playing sports or not, right? The time management, the taking care of yourself, to meeting with professors, to balancing studies, to balancing your social life, that those are all the things that you're going to learn. So again, if you're here for 1 year, 4 years, or 6 years, right, those things are going to carry with you. And whether you're competing at Division I level, Division III, or you're playing club sports in college, it's doing it all and having to balance all that and to make it all work and be successful in all those areas.
And I think even, Chris, that the time management of when you do your homework in college, right? For the first time, for a lot of kids, you're there by yourself, but kids here, they're used to Trinity-Pawling, the schedule. They're used to school, then practice, and then homework from 8 to 10. And I think, we were all in college with a couple of the kids who were in boarding school, I presume, and that's when you did your homework. It fits so nicely into the schedule that it just becomes a routine. It becomes easy. And I think then adding on to Coach Loff, what you said about what coaches want someone who can work hard in other avenues. More onto that, admissions staff wants people who can work onto that. For a coach, he wants someone that can get to admissions and do well. And when you're in admissions, if you're doing an interview with admissions and they're looking, well, they know you can play football, they know you can play lacrosse, they know you can play hockey, but then they hear, oh, you were going to play too? Or, oh, okay, you helped clean the pond, or you helped do this, or you led in ropes course, or you were prefect, or you're this. And I think it makes that pathway through admissions so much easier when we are often so much defined by our sports, but when you can be more than just that, when you can be a great lacrosse player, great wrestler, but you're also a great human in all aspects.
Yeah, I think I think the correlation between being competitive, right? Like whatever avenue, whatever venue that is, right? So I think, and again, like I want kids that will compete in everything they do, right? And I think to a coach here and the coaches that are on this, that work here, we all want kids that are going to be super competitive, right? And obviously that's an easy thing sometimes to do in athletics, right? Because they love it, it's fun, they want to compete. Are you going to compete in the classroom? And that doesn't mean you're a perfect student. That doesn't mean like you're straight A's and you're perfect test taker, because frankly, that's not every kid. But like, are you going to compete? Like if I'm playing JV hoops, which would be in a lot of trouble if I'm on the court, right? But if I'm playing JV hoops, like I'm going to give you everything I got, right? Like we're going to go all out. Like, and we say that all the time in track, because again, track and field here is super competitive. But it's competitive because there's the best athletes that aren't, spring sport kids, right? The best athletes in the school that aren't, lacrosse, baseball, those kind of kids are out for the track teams. So now the hockey kid, the football kid, the basketball kid, now they're going, well, I'm pretty fast too. Let me try this. Or, I can jump pretty far too. Let me try this. And then, and that's how you kind of motivate kids, right? Like we do that in the classroom as well, where you kind of appeal to them. And I think being an all boys school and appealing to that competitiveness and that drive, to me, is it just works. It works here.
I think if you you take that competitiveness and you combine it with healthy risk taking, you have some of the best things that Trinity-Pawling does. I mean, it's an incredible opportunity for young men, because you're going to get coached at the highest level in all of these sports. You're going to get coached perhaps in a second sport at the highest level. And not even even if you're not the top athlete in most of our programs, most of the guys on this panel know this, right? We're often coaching, even as a head varsity coach in baseball or football, etc. We're often coaching guys that are JV players or maybe even thirds players throughout a lot of the season or the off season. Those guys are all included in the strength and conditioning development. They're included in a lot of the preseason workouts. They're included sometimes in season practices. They may be playing with the varsity, or they may be working out with the varsity and playing in a JV program. I wanted to go back quickly with one other thing that Nick said was, when you're speaking, talking about these tours, I think the absolute best thing that we do is in developing the student athlete as a whole, the person as a whole. And I think I think what families see in their own graduates is confidence, communication, resourcefulness, being proactive, being resourceful. And those things are intangible. We can't mark those, but if you go back to compete and taking risks in new areas, those things are brought out. And I think that's just an incredible benefit to our kids. I want to go to two anecdotes because we get off of this a little bit. With the multi-sport athletes, I began thinking, and I jotted down here. I'll do two current kids. One is a junior, and he's a hockey and baseball player, both at a very, very high level. Baseball has sort of emerged as probably the predominant sport. But when I speak to colleges about that individual, they stop in their tracks when they hear hockey. They want to know more about that. What is he doing, in that arena? Another student is a football, squash, baseball kid who he was playing three sports actually as a sophomore. This is a couple of years back, but he's played squash. He's a righty pitcher, played squash lefty the entire year. But one of the things that came out of this is I can't believe the way that my hips are moving, because he, moving back and forth and his agility, and they've opened up. I mean, what he was doing then out, thereafter on the mound was something. So the flexibility of playing these sports, multiple sports, and we were hinting at it earlier, not only, running between, as Gil was saying, running between sports to cheer on your brothers, but running from hockey practice and then going into the gym to get swings, or stay sharp in terms of your batting practice, or playing basketball and then running down to get strength and conditioning in the weight room after practice. That flexibility you don't get in a lot of places.
Well, and I think that's something, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think, especially in the winter, even as Ralph mentioned, the beauty of being a fan and having that home wrestling meet, the hockey game, the basketball game, and the squash match all at once, and you can just fly around and see it is just tremendous. But also in the winter, when a wrestling athlete goes and picks up his baseball glove and then heads out into the Smith Fieldhouse to get in some grounders, to get in, so that the beauty of it is that you're not losing out, right? I think that's sometimes what a lot of, whether you're a beginner athlete or you're hoping to play in college, you're not losing out in terms of missing something when you're playing another JV varsity sport. There's going to be time to be able to do that. And I think that's something, very unique here, and the opportunity to be involved in multiple things. And, you all have, I'm going to fly to one of these questions that just came in, and maybe Coach Gilman, you might be able to answer this. But, we've all talked about athletes trying something different, and Coach Weber, you talked about healthy risks, and, your son, Joe, getting up on stage. And so, Coach Gilman, as that question a parent always has is how am I going to get my athlete on that stage? Or how am I going to I know he's got a great voice. he gave it up because it's not cool to sing in the glee club. You know, how do we as a school, as teachers, as coaches, as advisors help in that?
That's a great question. I think before we talk about the role that the adult has, I think the peer role is way more important when I'm hearing Mike talk about Joe. And I mean, I'm just and I coach Joe in lacrosse, but to know that Joe was leaving practice on Thursday and Friday of the week that he was performing the play so he could go practice, or he can go do, he can go get ready to get on stage, and knowing the kids that were there at practice were then going to go cheer him on or go attend the play on a Friday night. And it's not mandatory, but right, they love Joe. They see Joe at practice every day. They want to make sure that they're getting there to support him. So I think that's number one is first off, I would encourage, if you're asking me as an adult or as an advisor or as a coach, I would be encouraging kids to go and explore those things. Maybe not join, chorus or join the play yet or join theater, but we encourage I encourage, a lot of my athletes and my advisees to, you should be in public speaking or stage combat with Ken Burnham. I think that's a great avenue and then they're like, oh, this is kind of fun. And then Ken sucks them in and they do the theater, and then they love theater. And whether it's, they do a play every term or they do a play once in their life here, to me, it's just kind of pushing them in that direction to first go check it out. And then I think organically it kind of just happens itself, and they're like, this is kind of cool. That's outside of the sports realm. I think when it comes to sports in general, I think like kind of what you were saying, JP, but I think having the students be able to access these facilities, not whenever they want, but kind of when they want, on a weekend with, in a normal year, when they can go down to the gym and shoot baskets, or go into the squash courts and mess around with their roommate, or just, and who knows what kind of, this is kind of fun. And who cares if I play varsity squash or third squash, right? This is enjoyable for me. Like Sam was saying, it kind of takes the pressure off of, okay, if you're, a varsity sport, athlete in another sport, like, great, just go mess around, or, open ice, go skate. And who knows, there's a lot of kids that just kind of then play, thirds hockey and just kind of, so I think having the resources here and having the availability to these facilities, I think is a huge benefit for them. And it's, I don't like to compare, but if you're thinking about a public school where a lot of the sports take place off campus, where your parents are dropping you off at the field, or they're dropping you off at the rink, or, the wrestling mat, and then you kind of get picked up and you go home. Right. So not being able to just walk from wrestling until grab your glove and just, okay, a couple of my buddies are in there hitting in the batting cage, like, let me take a couple swings and see what happens. So I think being able to get the opportunity to explore that is super important for these kids in kind of their adolescent years. But I first, to answer the question, I don't know if I did, but encourage them to just explore a little bit and support their classmates and their peers, and who knows, whether it's, again, in the theater or another sport, or in chapel with being an acolyte, who knows what's going to happen. But just kind of getting your feet wet in all those different kind of venues, I think is the best way to take those risks, or to, dabble with that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of encouragement from the faculty, and a lot of credit goes to our student leadership and just how they really support each other. I remember last year having the captain of the wrestling team say, on a Thursday night, he had to leave a little bit early with a couple of the other wrestlers because they were doing a 24-hour play skit, and he's like grabbing some of the younger guys and be like, hey, let's go do this. This will be fun. So there's a lot of that, and there's tons of support. Mike talked about, the healthy risks. There's a ton of support from the faculty to make those healthy risks. And the students, as they grow here at Trinity-Pawling, they learn from their student leaders, and then they grow over time and become those individuals who are in the theater, captains of sports teams, prefects, proctors, and they're helping encourage and drive kids to try things and become confident in doing different things and new things. So it's definitely, that whole community aspect really helping to grow these boys.
I think that's a good point, Ralph. I kind of see it as the kids, they gain so much trust in the faculty and in one another over time, right? As they build the relationships, they build, storylines, they build empathy for each other. They, when a student decides to jump out and take one of these risks in a new area, whether it's a sport or a stage, etc., they feel almost like that risk that they're taking is, it's okay if they fail at it, because I know that these folks are behind me. They've given me enough confidence to, to one, take the step. And if it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out.
Right.
Well, and I think one of the other, I wrote down two words, opportunity and availability. And, Coach Gilman mentioned it, but, Trinity-Pawling is unique in the sense that athletics happens majority from, let's just say 3 to 5. And then, but music and art and theater and all of these other things that you might want to try, or we've had so many kids walk through these doors that used to do something. They used to play an instrument. They used to be involved in X, Y, and Z, but because of athletics, they had to stop doing that. The opportunity and availability at a place like Trinity-Pawling is there. You can be, as Joe Weber was, as I was, you can be an athlete and a musician and an artist, all in this same opportunity. And I think that's critical, especially for the families that are on this call who have that younger son, that, maybe 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th grade. This is an opportunity where you're going to get, sometimes I think you're going to get your childhood back in a way, because we have the time to do it all. My advisor junior year told me I was burning the candle at both ends. So you have to work with your advisor to make sure that you can do a lot, but you also have to make sure that you're healthy and you're getting sleep and so forth. But the opportunity is there, and I think that's an important aspect.
I
just want to talk. Go ahead, Bob.
I'm sorry, man. Sorry, Sam. I do think that we're different, right? Trinity-Pawling is different. Here's why, right? We're all boys. The single gender thing gives you permission to take healthy risks inside and outside the classroom. No question about it. Ask any alum, right? I think there's no doubt about the fact that there's not a pretty girl in the front row, the fact that there's not a pretty girl there, right? You might be able to take and get outside your comfort zone a little bit. And I think that's a great thing, right? But I think also that, going back to what you said, JP, and what Gil was talking about, right? It's the access. We're also different because the access and availability, and we're different than other prep schools because of that. One has to do with the number, right? We're a small school. We're intended to be a small school. You're going to be spending time with teachers. There's times where you'll be on the ice, maybe in the morning with Chris Gilman. Then you'll be in class with Coach Fideli and Mr. Clawher, right? Then you're going to baseball practice, and then, with Webbs, and then you're going to theater practice with Burnham at the end of the day, and you're boom, 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 boom. And then you're surrounding your son with all these people that are giving themselves and they're passionate about whatever interest they have, right? And he's just feeding off that. And then all of a sudden, like, they're not going to love everything, right? They're not. Like, I teach math. Like, you don't have to tell me, right? Like, I get it, but like, you might strike a match with those kids. And when you do, case in point, Lucas Hughes never wrestled in his life. Hey, Ralph grabs him one day, or Mr. Dunham grabs him one day. Hey, why don't you try this out? He's wrestling in college at a great school. I think one of the elite schools.
Oh, here we go.
Wesleyan, is that the one?
That's funny.
Right.
Right. And I think it's so easy for us to mention the grand scale achievements, the kids who are captains, who are on stage and stuff, but on a much smaller scale, it happens every day too. I mean, and this is all, it often might even make it home to parents because it's something as simple as a kid who joins 30 for 30 club, where they just watch ESPN documentaries and they're talking about sports, but then 2 weeks in, they're doing critical film analysis. They don't quite know it at the time, but that's what they're doing. Or they really like cookies and they happen to live on dorm with someone who makes cookies, and then suddenly they're in baking club. And yeah, these things have always been harder to do this year. I think we're crazy to say, to say this year has been normal in that regard, but in a normal year, they're even the small risk and small trying things, stuff that happens out, or or their assistant coach, and talking on a situation mine, assistant coaches leads cheese club, and they just like cheese, so they do it, and they start picking up knowledge that, sure, it's not hard, it's not getting on stage, it's not singing, but it's still little risks that are slightly outside one's comfort zone. I think they're the achievements that we often overlook as people, just in general, not anywhere, but are so prevalent on a day-to-day basis at TP.
JP, I just want to go back to something that Webb said, and I think it's, he mentioned something about the support and that we give your sons, but I think it's important for folks to understand the support that I think we give each other. So from coach to coach or from teacher to teacher, because I think you were talking about the opportunity and availability, and that doesn't happen without a coach saying, oh yeah, it's okay that you can leave practice and go to rehearsal, right, for the play, or yep, you need to go see a teacher for extra help. Like, okay, you're going to be 5 minutes late for film. Great. Right. And you're not, and the, obviously for the most part, the student athlete's not going to get screamed at, but the idea is that we understand the day to day, and we want students to take risks. We want them to explore a little bit, right? We want them to have those opportunities. So we're encouraging it. So why not be okay with it? And I think that's one of the good things, is to say, like, okay, like Webbs was saying, it's okay if you want to get off the ice 5 minutes early so you can go to baseball. That's great. Us coaches and us teachers being able to support each other's programs and to support and believe what each of us are doing, I think is super valuable. And you're not, you may not get that somewhere else where, your high school, I know a lot of places, right? Your high schools, you play high school sports, you can't play cup sport, or vice versa, right? There's like a contract. Well, you're going to, here, you don't have those club sports necessarily, but we're going to support you and be able to go from football practice to the weight room for hockey to then going and getting into the batting cage for baseball. So having the availability and having, the opportunity, I think is also what kind of encourages those healthy risks.
So it is 7:49, and I have there's a handful of questions here that I definitely want to get to, and I'm kind of rapid fire because we want to get to as many as we can. So I'm going to answer actually the first one because it's a quick one, but the question is just, what sports are offered at Trinity-Pawling? And so in the fall, we've got soccer, cross country, as well as, what's that other sport?
We play American football here as well.
Okay, thank you.
Gridiron football.
So we have those 3 sports, and the beauty of that is, there's 3 to 4 soccer teams every year. There's a program of 50 football players out on the field, from someone who's just putting pads on to a potential college-bound athlete, to an incredible group of kids on a cross-country field. But we also have varsity farming for those kids that might not have that fall sport. And that's a whole other conversation that we could get into. We just created a mountain biking program. We have an incredible trail on our campus, but as well as incredible opportunities off campus as well. And that was started this year and is just gonna get bigger and bigger. In the wintertime, hockey, wrestling, squash, basketball, as well as a recreational ski program. We go down to Thunder Ridge and go snowboarding. And then in the springtime, we also bring back another farming team who is, we're grateful because they plant all the seeds for our summer vegetables. But then we've got baseball, lacrosse, tennis, golf, and track and field. And again, all of these programs have different levels. And I think that's another opportunity that isn't offered maybe in the public school system or even at other boarding schools that are co-ed. Because if you only have one hockey rink, you can't have 6 different teams. So one of the questions that actually kind of leads from this, and maybe I'll ask Coach Gilman if you could kind of talk about this. I just have to find it. It's all about playing time, actually, and how is it managed? And the question is really, is there a unified approach, or is it more kind of managed team by team? Again, we've got 9 minutes because we don't want to take too much time from our guests. But if you could talk a little bit about how the coaches manage that.
Yeah, no, I think I would say it's going to be managed team to team, obviously, and I think depending on, again, your sport and your level. But I would say some of the, just to quickly kind of hit it, is we're going to encourage, first off, and I would say most people on this panel would encourage your son to speak with their coach. If there's a question about playing time, if there's an interest about playing time, we're more than happy to discuss that and speak and give them the best possible solution of, okay, do you want more playing time? Where do you see yourself going? How do we see you developing? And I think that's super important. I would say everybody here does a very good job of communicating kind of the areas in which you need to improve if you're trying to get more of the playing time. If you see yourself in a different role, that's going to be communicated with you or with
Perfect.
your student athlete.
Coach Loff and I know Coach Gilman did a lot of the strength and conditioning this fall, but I know, Coach, you do a lot of that in the wintertime. And the question is the workout program another option instead of a seasonal sport? I mean, a lot of what we talked about in the last 53 minutes is that we kind of do it at the same time, but just talk about that a little bit.
When you're younger, you don't have that option, but as you get older, you do have that option. So I think a junior year, senior year, you could take a season and do some of the development stuff that we do. I think case in point to what we're saying about, coaches working together is, Coach Gilman steps up in the fall, does the strength conditioning. Coach McDougall takes it upon himself to go out and do speed training with our kids, which again, like the soccer athletes and the football athletes and cross country athletes all did. And Coach Peary as well, one of our lacrosse coaches, steps up and does agility training for a couple of days a week as well. And again, nothing in our titles say that we have to do that. It's about us giving back, us trying to improve our kids. So so you have the option to do one of those. You can do, and with the COVID stuff, it was a little trickier. We had to have signups and things like that. But in a normal year, you do have some open time as well. So
perfect.
I'll add JP that
Yeah.
it's important to note that Nick and Chris especially, has established time for not only the fall sports, but he was establishing, time slots for those guys who had, first sports outside of the fall season. So there were 2 or 3 segments a week for hockey players, 2 or 3 segments a week for baseball players, 2 or 3 segments a week, and so on for basketball players, soccer players. And that was a tremendous asset, I think certainly during this time. I think it's probably something we also want to continue to build on as we get into these off seasons, right? As Nick moves into the off season, geez, what a wonderful thing is if he can have slots, during the winter or the spring or whatever for football, and same with me for baseball back in the winter season. Something to build off of.
Yeah. Coach Fideli, a question. You mentioned, you were part of the junior leadership program, the ropes course. And that just made me think of this question kind of comes up. Can you describe the relationship between freshmen and student athletes, and how the older athletes might mentor, as you think about maybe when you were a student, but also as a coach. And I hope I'm getting this question correctly, but how are the older athletes helping out the younger athletes?
Well, I would say first it starts in the dorm. We have proctors, either juniors, returning juniors, or seniors or postgrads, and they take on that role of leadership on the dorm. So I have my two wrestling captains on my side of Hastings, and they're in charge of freshmen, and they've been, helping them get through daily life here at Trinity-Pawling. And then I think that sense of leadership that we build over time at our school certainly translates onto the athletic field. Whether it's, the lower football guys seeing how the older football players are going about their business, and seeing how they develop, wrestling, we're all together as well. And so, we have middle schoolers in the same room as our seniors, and being able to see how they train, and seeing kind of just organically some of the older guys going and trying to help young guys out. And I think you see that in the weight room, you see that on the athletic field, and you see it on the dorm, especially. And I think that's where a lot of bonds are built as well, is just being on campus, and developing those relationships.
Does any of either Coach Gilman, Coach Weber, I know you both, Coach Weber, you were senior former advisor for a long time, and now Coach Gilman, is there ever that kind of conversation, maybe not in the form meetings, but, are we talking to our upperclassmen about that, whether it's on the field or in general? Is there an opportunity for us to do that? And has that happened?
I mean, just currently, I know, we kind of address when we speak as a class, as a senior class in particular, is to talk about the natural leadership that happens when you're a senior, whether, again, you don't, everything that Ralphie said, but there are a number of seniors here that aren't proctors, that aren't prefects, and that aren't sports captains, but you assume some sort of natural leadership by being a senior, by being a PG, especially, right? You've been through this whole process already. So we spend a lot of time in the beginning of the year addressing what that means, and how you can kind of, and how that trickle down effect plays a role in the younger students. Again, you're living with them, they're seeing you every day, they're seeing you in every aspect of your life. So what you do on a daily basis 24/7 is actually, kind of put in the spotlight. And whether, they're looking down at you in chapel from the balcony, if you're, how you behave there and how you act there, that's going to kind of set the stage for what the next 4 years of the school is going to look like, whether you believe it or not. So while there's not a direct kind of mentor program between senior and freshman, I would say, kind of between the way that the community is here and the way the schedule works and the way that we live here, I think it kind of, like Ralph said, it kind of happens organically, but I think it's important to, I would say most of the seniors understand what kind of is what they need to do by having a 12, next to their name, and by being a senior.
And juniors, part of that is, probably through sophomore year and junior year, we start to develop those ideas of leadership, the leadership program, towards, this spring, towards the end of winter and spring, we'll be discussing with juniors about what it takes to be a leader, and talking about all those things. So there is some growth up through to their senior year, about being leaders and taking on those roles, whether it is just being a senior on campus and kids looking up to you, or holding a official position.
Yeah, I just add, Ralph, I think it's you were hitting on it. I think there's a evolution between junior and senior year that occurs because of on the outset, the boys are required to sit back and reflect and put some thought into what they think that leadership means. Then the ability to share that in front of the group, what their perspective is. And as they move into senior year, following the ropes course and so on, these other programs, I think Chris does a nice job of putting it on them. You're putting that leadership on the senior class, whether the seniors want it or not. You're putting it on the entire class that this year is going to be successful, and it's going to be successful because you guys drive the ship, right? And if we fail at that, then we may not be as good as a community.
Yep. So I've got two more questions, and then we're going to finish off. In this one, Coach Clawher, there's a question that came in on the chat, but also in registration, just about tryouts. And one of the questions was a sport specific, but I think we can kind of bring it out to all sports, from, 7th and 8th graders and 9th all the way up to seniors. What are tryouts like? And I would say the answer is yes, we have tryouts, but how does that work, in all the different sports?
Yeah, so for soccer specifically, we have tryouts in a preseason schedule. So we'll come back. We bring back guys back about 7-8 days before school starts. I'm forgetting the exact timeline. And we'll practice in 1.5, 2 practices a day to get an idea of who the team is and what the team should be. And typically for us in the fall, we'll have the JV coaches with us as well. So the varsity coaches will be communicating with JV coaches about who's likely to fit in what level. Some people will try out for varsity and may play on thirds. Some people will play middle school, some people will play JV, and it's a communication with coaches throughout the program about what's best for not just the varsity team, not just the program as a whole, but also the player as well. Maybe they are younger, maybe they have some talent, maybe they're older and it's brand new to the game, but they're big and athletic. It's how can we best serve them? And that really applies to all sports throughout the school. It's more competitive for some than others. Some sports can afford to keep more players in the team, for example. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the winter tryouts typically begin the last week before Thanksgiving break, and similar kind of timeline for spring tryouts. And for both those winter and spring sports, you kind of get a chance to play with that team or work with that team in some capacity through the fall and the winter, as we talked about throughout, with those kind of multiple sports going on in some capacity at the same time, whether that be baseball players working in the gym through the winter. You get it's not a tryout per se, but you're getting a sense of, as a coach and as a program, who fits in where.
And I would say, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, you could be a freshman and be the star, and get all the playing time, you want. So it's at a place like this, it doesn't matter, just because you're a senior does not mean that you're going to, get, be the guy or have the playing time, or what have you. If at the varsity level, we're playing, the best student athletes on the field, on the court. Is that what you would agree? I see a lot of head shaking, but yes.
Yep.
All right. My last question, and this, this actually comes from a past parent. It also comes from a parent who's looking at Trinity-Pawling again for another son. I'm just going to change the question a little bit, but, and you can all answer or some of you, but what's the biggest lesson that as a coach, and we've talked about it, but what's the biggest lesson as a coach that you want our student athletes to take away from their experience at Trinity-Pawling? Maybe even the experience that we've been through right now. And again, it's 8:04, so we can't all wax eloquently on this one, but what's a lesson that we want the boys to take from their experience?
Well, I'll jump in here. I think that I know we were getting ready for the fall, and Sam was racking his brain, and I was too, and we were just trying to make it productive for the fall, this past fall with COVID. And I remember consciously thinking, like, well, one of the things that I think kids get out of athletics is the chance to battle through adversity, right? Like, get through adversity. Like, the only way is through, right? So and I was trying to figure out ways to recreate that, right? So I'm like, without competitions, without interscholastic competitions, we did a lot of internal competitions. Like, how can I create that? And then again, genius me, like the next morning I wake up and say, wait a second, they're battling adversity every single day with what we're going through right now in this current pandemic. And it was to a point where, our kids came back in the fall and they were just so excited to be around each other. And we did things this fall, the mountain biking club, quad Olympics, getting outside. We did fishing derbies. We did a giant a round of capture the flag with little dodgeballs to tag each other. And it was joyful to see how much they just dove in and loved being a part of something and were able to kind of get themselves through by depending on each other. So again, like we want them to learn to kind of get through adversity because life's going to hit you and it's how you get through it. So, and I think a great example of that is the way they handled the fall term.
I think that was fantastic. Well said. So for this incredible panel of coaches, of teachers, of parents, Sam, you'll be there at some point. But thank you for spending time with us tonight, and also for our registrants, are the families that came aboard tonight. Thank you for taking the time and listening about the Trinity-Pawling athletic experience. And I know that we didn't get to everyone's questions, and I know for the current families that are on the call, I know that you're wondering about the winter and the spring, and I'm sure in the coming days that the school will be in touch and will answer those questions. But for tonight, we wanted it to be more about 2021 and next year and that experience for your sons as well as new Trinity-Pawling brothers that come through these hallowed halls. So on behalf of the panel, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you in person very soon. So thanks again and have a great night.
Roll Pride.
Thank you.